Jeffrey Epstein moved nearly $1.1 billion through one account, and Pam Bondi with the Trump DOJ are keeping Congress from seeing the full records. What are they hiding?
Mr. President, Donald Trump has made some far-fetched statements over the last few months, but a stunner in the last few days was his claim that the Jeffrey Epstein matter was a hoax and a scam. Here is why the president is wrong. The figure at the center of this story was an ultra-rich, well-connected sex trafficker. He was a serial rapist of women and young girls. And for some reason, the Trump administration, they claimed they'd be the most transparent administration ever, turned on a dime. The president had run on a campaign with a promise to expose the Epstein files. Now he and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, say, nope, nothing to investigate. When it comes to Epstein and sex trafficking, all these claims are just ludicrous. I want the American people to know that that's wrong. If you want to know why, just look at the latest report from our investigators that was discussed in the New York Times this morning. Now, somewhere in the Treasury Department, Mr. President, locked away in a cabinet drawer, is a big Epstein file that's full of actionable information. Follow the money details about his financing and operations that await investigation. Last year, the Biden administration allowed our investigators to look at portions of the file. We did that at the Treasury building. Here is what it says. Treasury's Epstein file details, Mr. President, 4,725 wire transfers. Let me repeat that. 4,725 wire transfers, adding up to nearly $1.1 billion flowing in and out of just one of Mr. Epstein's bank accounts. If you ask me, that is more than 4,000 potential lines of investigation right there. Hundreds of millions more flowed through other accounts. That's even a lot more to investigate. The file shows that Mr. Epstein used multiple Russian banks, which are now under sanctions, to process payments related to sex trafficking. A lot of the women and girls he targeted came from Russia, Belarus, Turkey, and elsewhere. One shudders to think about the kinds of people who must have been involved in trafficking these women and young girls out of those companies and into the Epstein web of abuse. Again, these are all potential leads, Mr. President, the Department of Justice ought to be digging into. This is about years and years of international sex trafficking. None of this is a hoax. None of it is a scam. And I'd like to say I consider it insulting to the intelligence of the American people for the Trump administration to simply say there is nothing to investigate here. Now, when the Trump administration came in with a lot of fanfare about transparency and openness, I said, I'm going to follow up on that. So I wrote to the Attorney General, Ms. Bondi, Treasury Secretary Bessent, FBI Director Patel, and I asked them all to produce the Epstein file to the Senate Finance Committee so it could be reviewed. In fact, I've made that request multiple times. The Trump commitment to transparency, based on the response, didn't mean a whole lot because they just refused. Here's what one Treasury official wrote back to me. I'll quote here. The Department of Treasury has previously made documents available relating to the matter in response to your inquiries. Accordingly, we understand that you have the information you seek from the Treasury related to this request. We thank you for your attention to this important issue. Mr. President, for anybody who's familiar with how these discussions go in Washington, D.C., what I just read was code for the bureaucracy saying, you're asking for information, go pound sand. The Trump administration may be trying to close the books on the Epstein sex trafficking. But I want it understood as a senior member of the Senate Finance Committee, where we spend a lot of time looking at where substantial sums of money are going, particularly if they may be promoting wrongdoing and helping to evade taxes. We are going to stay on this fight to hold the wealthy individuals accountable for the harm that they clearly were involved in the young women and others in this sex trafficking. So I'm going to have more follow-up for Attorney General Bondi very quickly. As for today, Mr. President, if she doesn't want to do the investigating, doesn't want the DOJ to do it, let me just restate my original demand. Have that Treasury information given to the Senate Finance Committee and have us on a bipartisan basis do our work. That's what we do in important investigations. If the Trump people believe they need additional authority to carry out the requests that I make again this afternoon, let me offer to help them write the bill myself. The idea that there is nothing more to investigate, not when you have 4,000 wire transfers, many of them associated with the possibility of wrongdoing and sex traffic promoting. The idea that you have that and there's nothing to investigate when it comes to the Epstein sex trafficking operation is ridiculous. Pam Bondi was the Attorney General in the state of Florida, where a lot of the Epstein crimes were committed. The Attorney General ought to know better, of all people. Mr. President, I can't begin to understand the President's handling of this or why he thinks this is just going to go away. But I'm here to say that our investigators have spent 3 full years looking into this. And the reason why is because we feel so strongly about the horror of sex trafficking and our commitment to root it out. The President of the Senate is new to this body, but I'm sure he's dealt with these issues before. You can't have a much bigger horror in front of you than sex trafficking abuse. So we're talking about real evil done to women and girls by Jeffrey Epstein. And Mr. President, nobody gets to sweep that under the rug. I yield the floor.
Senator Ron Wyden's statements on the Senate floor go far beyond political rhetoric. They peel back the layers of how power, secrecy, and money can obstruct justice, even in cases as horrific and well-documented as Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. This isn't just about headlines or political squabbles. It's about real victims, systemic failures, and the urgent need for transparency. Wyden starts by addressing President Trump's recent claims dismissing the Epstein case as a hoax or scam. At first glance, that sounds absurd, and it is. Epstein was a serial predator, a sex trafficker with global reach, exploiting women and girls from multiple countries. The scope and sophistication of his operation demand scrutiny, yet here we are, hearing claims from the highest office in the land suggesting there's nothing left to investigate. That's not just misleading, it's an insult to the intelligence of the American public and, more importantly, a slap in the face to the survivors. Then Wyden dropped a bombshell. The Treasury Department holds a massive file on Epstein, brimming with actionable information about his finances and operations. This isn't just bookkeeping, it's a roadmap of exploitation. One account alone contains 4,725 wire transfers totaling nearly $1.1 billion, and that's only a portion of his financial activity. Hundreds of millions more flowed through other accounts, including foreign banks in Russia, some now under sanctions. Each of these transactions represents potential evidence, links in the chain that could identify enablers, facilitators, and complicit institutions. Wyden explains how these files reveal the international nature of Epstein's network, highlighting that many victims were trafficked from Russia, Belarus, Turkey, and elsewhere. When you read these numbers and facts, it's easy to get lost in statistics. But behind each transaction is a human story, a life harmed, a young woman coerced, a family shattered. That is what makes this so urgent. This isn't abstract financial data. It's evidence of human trafficking, exploitation, and abuse on a staggering scale. Despite the significance of this material, the Trump administration has consistently refused to release it. Wyden requested the files multiple times from Attorney General Bondi, Treasury Secretary Bessent, and FBI Director Patel, but the response was the bureaucratic equivalent of a shrug. The Treasury Department effectively told him, "You already have the information you need," while keeping critical leads locked away from congressional oversight. That's obstruction in practice, and it undermines the very purpose of oversight committees like the Senate Finance Committee, which exists precisely to examine high-stakes financial activity and ensure laws are enforced. Wyden's frustration is palpable, and rightly so. He stresses that the Treasury files aren't just interesting numbers on paper. They represent thousands of potential leads to pursue perpetrators and enablers. Tens of thousands of wire transfers could uncover co-conspirators, illicit financial networks, and patterns of abuse. Ignoring them is not only negligent, it is morally indefensible. He also points to Pam Bondi's role. As Florida's former attorney general, she oversaw a state where many of Epstein's crimes occurred. One would hope that someone in her position would prioritize the victims and enforce the law rigorously. Instead, under Trump, Bondi's DOJ has stalled investigations, refused to release documents, and avoided transparency. Wyden calls this out directly. No one, not even a former state attorney general, should place political loyalty above justice for survivors. Wyden concludes with a powerful assertion. This is about more than politics or partisan point scoring. It's about accountability. Congress has a duty to access these files, scrutinize them, and demand answers. The Treasury information isn't just important, it's essential for justice. He even offers to draft legislation himself to make sure the committee can obtain the records. That's democracy in action: oversight, diligence, and commitment to the public interest. This is the stark truth for the American people. Epstein's crimes weren't isolated. They were enabled by money, networks, and the silence of powerful figures. Until these Treasury files are fully released and investigated, the system continues to favor the powerful at the expense of survivors. This is why every citizen, every lawmaker, and every journalist must stay vigilant. Transparency and accountability aren't optional. They are the foundation of a functioning democracy. The victims of Jeffrey Epstein, the women and girls whose lives were devastated, deserve justice, and it starts with Congress demanding full access to the records and following every lead. It starts with citizens staying informed and refusing to accept spin or secrecy as the final word. If you care about justice, accountability, and exposing the misuse of power, subscribe to The Liberal Lens, share this video, and support our work on Patreon. Every click, every share, every voice matters, because justice delayed is justice denied, and we cannot let survivors wait any longer.